No one noticed the maid at first. She stood quietly near the back of the grand hall, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on the polished coffin resting beneath soft white lights. Around her, the air was heavy with grief and luxury, expensive flowers, hushed whispers, and a low murmur of powerful people paying respect to a billionaire's elderly mother. To everyone else, this was the end of a life. But to the maid, something felt terribly wrong. The millionaire sat in the front row, his face cold and unreadable. He had planned everything perfectly: the funeral, the guests, the press silence. His mother had been declared dead late the night before. Doctors had signed the papers. The family lawyer had approved the burial. There was nothing left to question, or so he thought. As condolences poured in, no one imagined that a poor maid, someone who cleaned floors and served tea, was about to challenge the truth everyone had accepted. The maid had cared for the elderly woman for years. She had fed her, bathed her, listened to her late-night fears, and held her hand when no one else had time. She knew her breathing patterns, her faint cough, the way her fingers twitched when she slept. And that morning, as the maid was told to say her final goodbye, she noticed something small but terrifying: a faint movement, a mark on the wrist that wasn't there before, a memory of the old woman once whispering, "If I ever go quiet, don't trust them." As the priest spoke and the guests bowed their heads, the maid's heart began to race. Her thoughts screamed that the elderly mother of the millionaire was not dead, that this coffin might be holding a living woman. She tried to speak, but fear held her back. Who would listen to her? She was just a maid. One wrong word could cost her job, her reputation, even her freedom. Still, the thought of staying silent felt worse than any punishment. Suddenly, she stepped forward. The room froze. Eyes turned. The millionaire looked up, annoyed and confused. With a trembling voice, the maid said words that sliced through the hall like a blade. "Sir, please, take her out. She's not dead." Gasps filled the room. Some guests laughed nervously. Others looked away, embarrassed for her. The millionaire's face darkened with anger. How dare she disrupt his mother's funeral with such madness? But the maid didn't stop. Tears streamed down her face as she begged him to open the coffin. She spoke of signs, of care, of love only someone close could know. Security moved closer. The tension became unbearable. Was his grief driving her insane, or was she the only one brave enough to speak the truth? As the millionaire slowly stood up and walked toward the coffin, his hand hovering over the polished lid, one question hung in the air, silencing every breath in the room. What if the maid was right? And what if opening the coffin would expose a secret no one was prepared to face? The millionaire stopped inches away from the coffin. His hand hovered, then slowly dropped to his side. The room remained frozen, caught between shock and disbelief. He did not open it. Instead, he turned toward the maid, his voice low but sharp, asking how she dared to say such a thing on a day meant for mourning. The maid swallowed hard. Her knees felt weak, yet she stood her ground. This was not about courage, she thought. It was about conscience. As the guests whispered among themselves, the maid's mind drifted back to the long nights she had spent in the quiet mansion. The elderly mother had not been weak the way others believed. She had moments of confusion, yes, but she was aware, alert, and afraid. Often, she spoke in half-finished sentences, glancing at the door as if someone might be listening. She warned the maid more than once about trusting doctors who came too late at night and papers that were signed too quickly. Just 2 days earlier, the maid had helped her drink warm water before bed. The old woman's grip on her wrist had been tighter than usual. "If anything happens," she whispered, "remember how I breathe. Remember my hands." Those words echoed now, louder than the prayers in the hall. The maid remembered clearly that the elderly woman's hands were always warm, always moving slightly, even when she slept. But when the maid was allowed a brief look into the coffin that morning, the skin had not looked the way she expected. It looked rushed, prepared. The millionaire listened as the maid tried to explain, her words stumbling but sincere. He dismissed it as grief, saying she had grown too attached. He reminded everyone that certified doctors had confirmed the death. Still, something in his eyes flickered, a doubt, he did not want to acknowledge. His relationship with his mother had been distant for years. Business had always come first. He trusted reports, not instincts. The family lawyer stepped forward, suggesting they move on to avoid scandal. The security team waited for a signal to escort the maid out. Yet the atmosphere had changed. Guests were no longer mourning. They were watching. Phones stayed in pockets, but curiosity burned in every face. What if this was not madness? What if this funeral was hiding something darker? The maid felt the weight of every stare, but she continued. She spoke of unexplained injections, of locked doors, of nurses who never gave names. She admitted she had no proof, only certainty. Her voice cracked as she said she would rather lose everything than live knowing she stayed silent. The millionaire clenched his jaw. Opening the coffin could destroy his family's image. Leaving it closed could mean something far worse. He looked once more at the polished lid, then at the maid who stood shaking but unbroken. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, as if the sky itself was restless. Inside, no one breathed easily anymore. The coffin remained sealed, the truth trapped inside, waiting. And as the millionaire raised his hand again, this time not to open it, but to silence the room, the question grew heavier than ever. Was the maid protecting a life? Or was she about to uncover a secret that was never meant to come to light? The millionaire finally spoke, not to the maid, but to the room. He said this was not the place for accusations, that grief could make even the strongest minds imagine things. His voice sounded calm, trained by years of boardrooms and cameras, yet his fingers kept tightening into his palm. He ordered the ceremony to continue, but the priest hesitated, sensing the unease that had settled over everyone. The maid remained where she was, her eyes never leaving the coffin. From the edge of the hall, an old family friend watched closely. She had known the elderly mother since childhood and noticed small details others ignored. The way the coffin had been rushed in, the absence of the woman's favorite scarf, the fact that the doctors who declared the death were not the usual ones. She said nothing, but doubt crept into her heart. For the first time, she wondered if the maid's words carried more truth than comfort. The maid felt her past rising against her. She remembered how she was hired without questions, how she was paid in cash during the early months. At the time, she was grateful. Now, those memories felt heavy. She had seen private meetings between the millionaire and strangers late at night. She had overheard arguments behind closed doors about power of attorney and medical authority. At the time, it had seemed like family business. Now, every memory felt like a piece of a puzzle she was only beginning to see. The millionaire's son, standing near the aisle, looked torn. He had loved his grandmother deeply. He remembered her laughter, her sharp mind, her habit of squeezing his hand twice when she wanted to say something important. He studied the maid's face and saw no deception, only fear and urgency. When his father ordered security to step closer, the son felt something shift inside him. What if they were making a terrible mistake? Behind the scenes, the family lawyer whispered into the millionaire's ear about legal risks, public image, and consequences. Opening the coffin would invite questions. Closing it would end the noise. But the millionaire could not ignore the pounding in his chest. He had not seen his mother alive for days before her death. He had trusted reports. He had trusted systems. And now, a simple maid was challenging everything he believed in. The air grew heavier as time stretched. The maid noticed a faint sound, so soft she almost thought it was her imagination. A shift, a quiet thump from within the coffin. Her breath caught. She stepped forward again, tears spilling freely now, begging him to listen. Some guests looked away. Others leaned forward, their hearts racing with the possibility that this was no longer just a funeral, but a moment that could change lives forever. Security hesitated. The priest closed his book. The millionaire stood at the center of it all, trapped between reason and instinct, power and responsibility. The coffin remained sealed, the mystery deepening with every second. And as silence wrapped around the hall once more, one truth became clear to everyone present. Whatever lay inside that coffin was not done with them yet. The silence became unbearable. Every breath sounded too loud. Every movement felt like a mistake. The millionaire slowly raised his hand, signaling the guard to stop where they were. His eyes never left the coffin. For the first time since the funeral began, his face showed something other than control. It was fear, quiet, restrained, but real. The maid stood a few steps away now, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Outside, the storm grew stronger, rain tapping against the tall glass windows like impatient fingers. The sound blended with the tension inside, making the hall feel smaller, tighter. The priest whispered that perhaps they should pause the ceremony. No one objected. No one could. All eyes were fixed on the polished wood that separated truth from silence. The millionaire's son took a step forward without thinking. He remembered his grandmother's voice, how she once told him that truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it was buried. He looked at his father and asked, softly but clearly, what if they were wrong? The question cut deeper than any accusation. The millionaire did not answer. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked like a man carrying a weight far heavier than wealth. In the back of the hall, a nurse who had attended the elderly mother shifted nervously. Her hands trembled as memories rushed in, late-night calls, rush instructions, formed sign without explanation. She had followed orders, telling herself it was not her place to ask questions. Now, surrounded by doubt, she wondered if silence had made her part of something unforgivable. The maid moved closer again, her voice barely above a whisper. She spoke of the elderly woman's last words, of her fear of being forgotten, of her trust in someone who had no power except love. She said she did not want money or forgiveness. She wanted only one thing, the truth. Her words hung in the air, raw and human, impossible to ignore. The millionaire reached out and placed his hand on the coffin at last, though it felt cold beneath his palm. His mind raced through possibilities he had refused to consider. If the maid was right, everything would change. If she was wrong, the damage would still be done. Either way, there was no turning back. A faint sound echoed again, sharper this time. A few guests gasped. Someone dropped the program. The maid's breath caught as hope and terror collided inside her. The guards exchanged uneasy looks, unsure whether to intervene or step aside. The millionaire closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if gathering the courage he never needed in business deals. When he opened them, his expression had hardened into something new. Not anger, not pride, but resolve. As his fingers curled around the edge of the coffin lid, the room leaned forward with him, suspended on the edge of an answer no one was ready to face. The millionaire's fingers brushed the coffin lid, but before he could lift it, a sharp sound cut through the hall, a click like a lock being released. Everyone froze. The maid's eyes widened. The security guard stiffened. Even the millionaire's son took a half step back, sensing that something had shifted. The lid wasn't just resting there. It had moved on its own. A slow, almost imperceptible lift at the corner suggested that someone or something was inside waiting. A murmur spread among the guests. Some leaned in, curiosity and fear mingling. The priest whispered a prayer, but his hands shook. The millionaire's mind raced. How could the coffin move without anyone touching it? Was it a trick? A mechanical fault? Or had the maid been right all along? His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Every instinct told him to step back, but he couldn't. Not now. Then, unexpectedly, the nurse in the back of the hall stepped forward, her face pale and sweaty. She held a small, folded envelope in her trembling hands. You need to see this before you do anything, she said. It's from your mother. The room went dead silent. No one moved. The millionaire snatched the envelope, tearing it open. Inside was a single note, written in a shaky but unmistakable hand. Do not trust the doctors. Not everyone wants me alive. Only the maid knows the truth. Gasps filled the hall. The maid's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of confirmation, proof that she hadn't imagined the signs. The billionaire's control wavered. He looked at the coffin again, then at the people surrounding him, realizing that something larger than grief, larger than a simple funeral, was unfolding. There were secrets here, hidden in plain sight, that could ruin reputations, destroy relationships, and expose a conspiracy no one had dared speak of before. The son stepped closer to his father. What do we do now? He asked, voice trembling. We can't just leave her there if she's alive. But even as he spoke, the millionaire noticed something terrifying. A subtle movement under the coffin lid, a shadow that seemed to shift against the soft white lining. It was deliberate. It was unmistakable. Someone, or perhaps his mother herself, was struggling inside, security tensed, but the millionaire held up his hand. His voice, though low, carried authority. "No one touches it until I know what's happening." He glanced at the maid, whose face was now pale with fear and hope entwined. "If she's alive, it's because of you," he said. "Tell me everything you saw, every warning she gave, every sign." As the maid began to speak, revealing small but crucial details about the elderly mother's health, her fear of being declared dead, and the suspicious doctors who had been visiting late at night, a sudden crash echoed from the back of the hall. One of the massive chandeliers shook slightly, dust falling, as if the building itself reacted to the tension. Guests gasped again, stepping back. Even the millionaire felt a chill crawl down his spine. The coffin now seemed alive, not just a piece of polished wood. Shadows danced under the lid. Faint thumps accompanied each word of the maid's confession, and the room's temperature seemed to drop. Every eye was fixed, every heart racing, and the sense of imminent revelation hung thick in the air. Whatever was coming next would change everything. But no one, not the millionaire, the maid, or even the son, could yet imagine how deep the mystery went. The millionaire took a deep, steadying breath, the envelope still clutched in his hand. The room seemed to hold its collective breath with him. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt beside the coffin, placing both hands on the lid. The faint shifting beneath became clearer. Soft but unmistakable movements, a muffled gasp, a trembling hand pushing against the wood from within. The maid's tears fell freely now, hope and fear colliding in her chest. With a sudden surge of courage, the millionaire lifted the coffin lid. Light flooded into the dark interior, and every eye in the hall widened in shock. There, curled and shivering but very much alive, lay the elderly woman. Her eyes fluttered open, recognizing the faces above her, the first glimmer of life spreading across her wrinkled but familiar features. I told you," she whispered, voice weak but steady, looking directly at the maid. "I wasn't ready to go." Gasps turned into cries of disbelief and relief. The millionaire felt his knees weaken. Years of guilt, fear, and regret collided with overwhelming gratitude. His mother had been alive the entire time, trapped by rushed declarations, mistaken assumptions, and people who had no right to decide her fate. He helped her sit up, and the maid, trembling, knelt beside her, holding her hand as though nothing else in the world mattered. The son stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. He hugged his grandmother, feeling the warmth and strength he thought he had lost forever. The priest, previously frozen in uncertainty, finally exhaled and muttered a quiet prayer, his hands shaking with awe. Even the guests, some of whom had been skeptical or fearful, now whispered blessings and apologies to the maid for doubting her. The nurse, still pale, confessed quietly to the millionaire about the irregularities she had witnessed. The rushed paperwork, the doctors who avoided questions, the miscommunication that had nearly buried the woman alive. Each revelation layered onto the tension already building in the room, and the millionaire realized just how close they had come to an irreversible tragedy. Yet just as relief began to settle, a sharp sound echoed through the hall. The envelope the millionaire had opened earlier slipped from his hand. Another note, hidden beneath the first, revealed itself. Written in the same familiar handwriting, it read, "You found me, but not everything is as it seems. Trust no one outside this house. Some secrets are meant to remain hidden." The room fell silent once more. The elderly woman looked around, confusion and fear flickering across her face, and the maid instinctively squeezed her hand tighter. The millionaire's eyes darted to every guest, every staff member, searching for a hidden threat he could not yet see. The relief of discovering his mother alive was now mixed with chilling realization. The family's troubles were far from over, and the truth they had uncovered might only be the beginning. As rain battered the windows and the storm outside mirrored the storm of emotions within, the millionaire rose slowly, lifting his mother into his arms, and glanced at the maid. "We saved her," he whispered. But even as those words left his lips, a shadow flickered behind the curtains. A subtle movement no one else seemed to notice. a hint that someone had been watching, waiting, and that the mystery surrounding the elderly mother was far from fully solved. The hall remained tense, caught between relief and fear, as everyone realized that while one life had been saved, the secrets that almost cost it were still very much alive, and the real test of trust and courage was only just beginning. The millionaire carefully set his mother in a chair, wrapping a warm shawl around her frail shoulders. She shivered slightly, but smiled faintly at the maid, the same gratitude in her eyes that had always been there in quiet moments no one else noticed. The maid, exhausted but relieved, finally allowed herself to breathe. Years of loyalty, care, and quiet observation had not gone unnoticed, and for once her voice had been heard. The son sat beside his grandmother, holding her hand, tears still glistening on his cheeks. "We thought we lost you," he whispered. She squeezed his hand weakly but firmly, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "You almost did," she replied, her voice trembling. "But some things are meant to wait until the right moment." Her words carried weight, a reminder that life often defied human plans and expectations. The millionaire turned toward the guests, his mind still racing, processing the near tragedy. He realized how fragile life could be and how easily power and wealth could blind someone to truth and humanity. He cleared his throat and spoke, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today, we learned the most important lesson. No matter how busy or powerful we think we are, we must never ignore the people who care for us quietly, faithfully, and without expectation. And sometimes, those we underestimate are the ones who save us." The room remained silent, absorbing the weight of his words. The family lawyer stepped forward, nervously glancing at the millionaire. I will make sure all paperwork is corrected and reviewed," he said, the edge of unease still in his voice. The nurse, who had earlier confessed her mistakes, was reassured that her honesty would be appreciated, not punished. The maid, now at the center of gratitude rather than suspicion, quietly excused herself to prepare the elderly woman's comfort and needs. Her humility and courage had changed the course of the day and the lives in that mansion. Over the next hours, the storm outside began to ease, sunlight breaking through the clouds. Guests slowly left, many murmuring apologies and marveling at the improbable events they had witnessed. The atmosphere shifted from fear to reflection, from tension to gratitude. The millionaire remained with his mother and son, sitting quietly, listening to her stories and soft laughter that filled the hall once more. Every word reminded him of the human connections he had almost ignored in pursuit of success. Later, when the house was quiet, the millionaire stood by the window, watching the lingering storm clouds. He thought of the maid, whose loyalty and insight had preserved a life that no one else had recognized as endangered. He realized that wealth could never replace vigilance, empathy, or the courage to act on instinct and care. Life, he understood, was fragile and mysterious, but it was the attention to the small, quiet truths that often made all the difference. As night fell, the elderly woman rested safely, the millionaire and his son sitting beside her, holding hands and sharing stories. The maid, having completed her duties, quietly retreated, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The mansion felt warmer now, filled with lessons learned, trust rebuilt, and gratitude earned. And though shadows of past mistakes remained, the family knew one truth above all. Love, loyalty, and courage had saved a life, restored hope, and reminded everyone present of what truly mattered. The storm had passed, but the memory of the day lingered, a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty and danger, human compassion and vigilance could overcome fear, deception, and the impossible. And in that quiet mansion, the millionaire, his son, his mother, and the maid all understood that sometimes the smallest voices could hold the greatest power.